Howdy, friends. Thank you for listening to the Roundup Podcast. In this season of the podcast, you will hear breakout audio from Roundup 2024. If you have any questions related to the content, send them to sbtccollegiate@sbtexas.com. Don't forget, follow us on social media at sbtccollegiate. Now, enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to the Breakout, guys. This is starting, growing, and maintaining a student leadership team. My name is Cody. I serve as the college director at Redeemer Church out in Lubbock, Texas. We primarily serve the students of Texas Tech and LCU. Again, we're talking today, starting, growing, maintaining a student leadership team. Everybody got a handout? Cool. So a little bit about me. I am the husband to Cassidy. I'm the father of now 3 children. My wife, as of 3.5 weeks ago, just had our 3rd. So thank you. I'm barely here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, she's like, if you're doing this, I got up at 3 a.m., got on a flight, and I'm flying back tonight at like midnight. She's like, hey, if you're doing it, you got to be back before the kids wake up. I was like, okay, great. So we're here. Barely here, but we're here. So a little bit about me. I did not grow up in church at all. Was very unchurched. Came to faith at 16 after hearing the gospel for the first time in my life at a Wednesday night youth group at a small Baptist church in Corinth, Texas. Shout out, love them FBC churches. God saved me though. God saved me. After coming to faith, graduated high school, grew up in the Dallas area, grew up in Denton kind of area. I don't know. Yeah, shout out. Yep, Denton. It's something, I'll tell you that much. It is something. Studied business at Texas Tech. It was my first Sunday of my freshman year that I began attending Redeemer Church. Whenever I came to faith, went to this little Baptist church, and all my friends went over to the village in Flower Mound, and I asked them, said, hey, what church should I go to? They said, this church, and I've been there ever since. So for first Sunday freshman year, we're here. So during my freshman year, during my freshman year, a man named Richard Barnes, who is the then college director, he essentially grabbed me by my neck and began to try to meet up with me. If you've been in college ministry, you understand the trying element. I say try because I dodged him for like a semester because I was way too cool. I was the worst freshman boy ever. I was the absolute worst, but he got me. I began to say yes because I had no money, and so he bought me coffee and lunches and all the stuff. Yeah, shout out. We began to form a relationship that we still have to this day. And so I didn't know at the time, but Richard was discipling me. Again, I came to faith later in life, no less than maybe 2 years before this. And so I didn't know what was happening. That's part of why I was like hesitant. I got daddy issues. We can unpack at a different time. But I was like, what are you doing, dude? Why are you trying to like meet up with me? And so dodged him for a little bit, but he got me. Let me get you a handout real quick. Oh, good. Let's go. So Richard began discipling me. This discipleship relationship, it looked like reading the Bible at coffee shops, confessing sin, him opening up his home, challenging me in my faith, taking seriously this call that I felt like God was putting on my life to serve the local church with my vocation. And this theme of discipleship, it is key to what we are discussing today. I'll never forget it. First time we ever met up, he sat me down and he read to me 2 Timothy 2, 1-2. Does somebody want to read it loud and proud to the top of your handout? Who's got it?
You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus. What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also.
Richard was crystal clear with what was happening in our relationship. He said, hey, I'm going to do this with you, and you're going to do this with others. It's paraphrased, but that's basically what he said. In this passage, it has framed my view on discipleship ever since, and you can't talk about starting and growing and maintaining a student or college leadership team without talking about discipleship. It's all about discipleship. Starting a leadership team, discipleship, growing, discipleship, maintaining an often overlooked element of a leadership team is about discipleship. Just a quick show of hands. Who in here is a part of a ministry that's more on the like starting level? Like you're trying to get something off the ground. Okay, a few of you guys. What about growing? Like you've got a little bit of a leadership team, you're trying to grow. Okay, cool, a few of you guys. And then what about maintaining? How many of you guys are just blessed with leaders? And you're like, let's get them all, catch them all. Yeah, that's great. What we're going to be doing, this first part is defining some terms. So when we talk about discipleship, we're talking about discipleship within the context of college ministry. So collegiate discipleship is this. It's the commitment, this should be on your handout, It's the commitment of a more mature follower of Jesus taking the initiative ownership, and partnership with God for the growth of another, less mature follower of Jesus. One of my seminary professors, he always used to say that sanctification is the dualistic process of God and man, making the person look more like Jesus. And I think similarly, discipleship is this process of God, the one being discipled, and other followers of Jesus to make the one being discipled look more like Jesus. Next term, college leadership team. As you can imagine, we're talking about this a lot. But when I say college leadership team, I mean college students who are committed to serving within your ministry. Make sense? Simple enough. That looks like probably a lot of different things depending on your ministry, but it's okay. So today is going to be divided into 3 parts. Part 1, starting. Part 2, growing. Part 3, maintaining. But this is just a starting point. This is not going to be all, inclusive, exhaustive, whatever. This is just hopefully enough to get you guys going in the right direction. How we're framing this time is these 8 simple principles that should, by God's grace, transcend your ministries wherever you're at, whether you're starting or growing or maintaining. Okay, principle number 1. College leadership is all about discipleship. We've already said it, but we cannot say it enough. And you know this to be true. And I believe personally that everything is spiritual, especially within the context of college ministry. And we cannot overstate that enough, is that it doesn't matter. We're going to talk a lot about strategy and pipelines. There's a QR code with documents. We're going to do that. We're going to do the hard work of building a structure in which your college ministry, by God's grace, will grow, but God must be in it. You cannot strategize your way into sanctification of your students. You cannot strategize your way into life change. God must be in this. And whenever I think about talking about this, I honestly feel pretty humbled. But one thing that I am certain of is that God wants to grow your ministries and he wants to build your leadership teams way more than you do. He does. He wants to build it way more than you do because of that. Because of that reality that exists for all of our ministries. We work hard, we strategize, we pray, we evangelize, we call students into this work. We do what Rashard did with me because we know that God is with us, not to try to get God on our team. God's with us. So we go, we work hard, we strategize, we do all the different things. We're going to talk about a lot today. I'm going to reference the QR code a million times. I think it's probably going to be most helpful if you wait at the end, because you're going to open it up and there's going to be like all these documents for all these different processes that we have that we're just made copies of it. So go nuts, share them, adapt them, do whatever you need to do, but maybe save that for the end or as we kind of progress, because I don't think it's going to be helpful if we open it up right now. It's just going to explode everywhere. It's not going to be great. So anyways, in sharing all of these things, first off, most of these things we got from other ministries, so we're all in this together. We're all on the same team. You know what I'm saying? We're all trying to win students over for Jesus. But do not hear me say at all that we have arrived. Because I'm sharing the things that these principles, how these principles work for us, do not take it as we've arrived. We have not. I think that when we talk about leadership teams, there always has to be this sort of like flexibility of like having these core convictions and principles that guide you no matter kind of what stage you're at, but you must be able to adapt, because just the reality is what worked for reaching the campus whenever I was a student 6 years ago is not the same as it is today. And I think a lot of you guys probably would agree with that. Okay, so principle number 2. That principle number 1 is college leadership is all about discipleship. Principle number 2 is student-led, staff-supported. How many of you guys have heard that? Okay, last group, it was like the whole room. I was like, okay, great, we could just skip over that. But student-led, staff-supported. It is imperative. If you've never heard this before, it is imperative that we as staff members are not at the center of our ministries. It is so important that we are not at the center of our own ministries. Yes, we are crucial. Yes, you are important. But it is always about empowering our students to do the work of ministry, because what happens when you leave? Ministry falls apart. If it's built on you, it'll fall apart the second you leave. At Redeemer, we talk a lot about being student-led, staff-supported. And part of letting students lead is staff doing the hard work of creating these discipleship pathways and pipelines of development for our students. Does that make sense? Part of our job is to create these clear pathways of discipleship and development for our students and then empower them to do the work. So within our ministry, we have 3 main positions that students can serve within. I'm going to abbreviate because nobody wants me writing. It is a nightmare. You got position number 1. This is on the colorful flow chart deal. Context leader. I'll explain what that means. GC leader, which is gospel community leader. And then you've got senior team. You've got senior team at the end. So GC leader, think small group leader. We have the two kind of weekly rhythms that our ministry does is we have a big weekly group gathering. Does anyone else have something like that? We meet once a week, sing, pray, teach, stuff like that. Okay, cool. And then we have our weekly small groups, which are led by college students in adults' homes. Does anybody have something similar to that? Cool. Okay. So whether you're a GC leader or a context leader or a senior teamer, you serve at kind of all of these different areas, whether it's the big group or the small group. That's kind of what context leader and GC leader. GC leader is the primary leader of the group. Context leader is more of like a supportive type leader. As we'll get to in a minute, this is for someone who like maybe came to faith like during welcome week and they're like, hey, I'm in, I want to serve, I want to apply for leadership. But it's like, hey, you've been a Christian for like 8 seconds. Let's pump the brakes, but we want to get you in our like leadership team and discipleship. That's what that position is. And you'll see that in a second. Each of these positions, each of these 3 positions, again, there's no other positions beyond this in which you can serve on our leadership team. Each of these positions has a document that clearly outlines the roles, responsibilities, hourly time commitments that we are expecting from them from a leadership perspective. So it outlines what we're asking of them, and it outlines what they are going to be getting from us. I don't know how else to describe it. Think discipleship, think leadership trainings, think days of equipping, things like that. It outlines everything that it means to be a part of our leadership team. So if you look at this, awesome flow chart, I don't know why I keep calling it a flow chart, this leadership as discipleship box, this just kind of highlights some of the things that our leadership team gets and what we ask of them. All of this is heading to our next principle, so just hang on for a second. So beyond just like, hey, this is what it means to lead, we actually have a code of conduct that each of our leaders sign and adhere to each semester that they serve on leadership, which might sound intense. It kind of is, but this code of conduct, it exists in conjunction with our covenant membership process. So any college student who wants to serve at the church as a whatever position has to be a covenant member of the church. And so this code of conduct looks like the commitments of being a member of the church and college-specific codes of conduct. I don't know. My brain kind of blanked there. The college-specific stuff. And we do this because at some level, anyone who said, hey, I'm interested in serving on your leadership team, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about leadership team. Anyone who said, hey, I'm interested in serving, or that you think would be a good fit, like we hold them to what it means to serve on the leadership team because we want to be really clear on the expectation. So each of the students who are interested in serving has likely expressed the desire to be a part of it. And so because of that, we hold them to the things of the faith. It's not anything beyond that, if that makes sense. So again, QR code takes you to some of these documents. Would leave that alone for now. We'll get there, I promise. But I share these things with you. These positions, commitment, code of conduct, expectations, all of this points us to our next principle, because it is so important to have crystal clear roles and expectations with what you're asking of your students. I'm going to say that again. It is so important to have crystal clear expectations of what you're asking for your students. So principle number 3, seek as much clarity as possible around the expectations for your leadership team. In other words, you must know what it is you're asking of your students. You must know exactly what it means to ask your students to join your leadership team long before you ever ask them to serve with you. An old preaching and leadership proverb applies to us in this conversation, and it's this: if there's a mist from the pulpit, it's going to be fog in the pews. The same is true for asking our students to serve. If you have some vague sense of what you hope your students will do, and they do it or don't do it, you're not setting anyone up for success. Has anyone ever been a part of that? Has anyone ever been like, hey, I want to serve, and then you just get like ran to the ground? You're like, I thought I was doing everything great. And they're like, well, actually, we want to have a conversation. You're like, oh my God. Lack of clarity sucks. It does, okay? So it's so important to seek as much clarity as possible around what you're asking of your leadership team. So some of you in here, maybe you're in the starting a college leadership team journey. A next step for you is to just simplify what it is that you're asking or hoping that they'll do. Is it leading a discipleship group? Is it sharing their faith once a week? Is it committing to be a part of a local church and adhere to covenant membership standards? Whatever it is, write it down. Some of you maybe have a leadership team and they're just kind of doing stuff. You just like shove them all into like a shotgun barrel and you're just like firing them out at campus. You're like, okay, some of this stuff rocks, but also like got some like weird stuff happening with a few leaders. Okay, that's happened to us. We've been there. Some of you guys need to streamline what it is you want them to be doing and what it is you want them not to be doing. Does that make sense? Make sense? So we at Redeemer, we have not always had this kind of clarity. Certainly whenever I was a student leader, it was like, hey, we're just glad you're here. You know what I mean? Anybody else ever had that sort of like, hey, we're just like glad you're here. We're not really going to talk about what we're expecting of you until like 30 minutes before, and then it's like, and like we tend to run students into the ground for this reason. So they're like barely holding their hand up saying they want to serve. It's like, great. Can you be at 7 things this week? It's like, okay, that's something we'll talk about in a second, but it's not helpful. And a lot of times they end up stepping down from our leadership teams because they're smoked, or because we're asking so much of them while not offering them anything in return. Does that make sense? So it's just, hey, do this, do this, do this, and there's no discipleship. It's almost like a one-way discipleship relationship. Does that make sense? Where it's like, hey, do all these things, thanks. Again, kind of sucks. And they step away, and we shouldn't be surprised because of it. So at the onset, it is so important that you answer this question. If you want to write down this as like a reflective question for you and your team to do later, is what is your leadership team? What does it mean for your students to serve on your college leadership team? What expectations are you holding them to? What do you want them to do? What do you want them not to do? So take just a second and just jot down anything that comes to mind, and we'll keep moving forward. By the way, to encourage you guys, a lot of what we're going to talk about today, a lot of the documents that we have that we're sharing with you guys have come because we've failed at some point. They exist because we've ran a student into the ground and had to clarify expectations, or we have been too lenient on a sin issue, and that has caused division in the ministry. All of these things exist because of like ways in which we failed. So do with that what you may. And consider what God might be asking of you guys. So, okay, surprisingly, we're now getting to part 1. Okay, that was the very long intro, but the rest is going to fly. So part 1, starting or recruiting a leadership team. So no matter what phase of ministry you're in, whether you're in starting, which is what we're going to talk about now, or you're recruiting, or you're growing, or whatever, you need to keep it simple. That's our next principle. Keep it simple. So when I first came on staff, one of my old mentors used to tell me when considering, hey, who to invite into leadership and discipleship, all these different things, is to run with the runners. Run with the runners. So illustration, if you're in a ministry, you're on campus and you're, maybe you're thinking about starting a ministry, first and foremost, you got to be on campus. If you're starting a ministry, you got to be on campus. There is no other way around it. If you're like, oh, we have like such cool events, and you're like not on campus at all, it's like, you got to be on campus. Like, you got to be on campus. We, as more of an established ministry, it's been around, we're on campus every week. You got to be on campus. You cannot miss that. So assuming that you're doing those things, being on campus, and you look up whether you're, particularly if you're starting a ministry, and there's students that just keep coming to you every week, whether the first time it is or because you're giving out coffee or donuts or whatever, and they just sort of like are lingering around you. You know what I'm talking about? That they're just kind of there, and you're like, what are you doing here? They're like, I don't know, but I kind of like you. And it's like a weird relationship dynamic, Those might be the people that God is calling you to run with. Those may be the runners that God is giving you. Or maybe you're part of a more established ministry, and you have students who are like you have a leadership team, but maybe you have some people kind of lingering on the outside. Does that make sense? Where they're like friends of friends, but they're there and they're existing, and they come and they're faithful. Those are probably the people that God is calling deeper into your ministry. And so we have kind of a threefold way of considering maybe if someone is a good candidate for leadership, and that's, are they faithful? Are they available? Who knows the last one? Teachable. Are they teachable? Are they faithful? Are they available? Are they teachable? This is a trap that we fell into, of making the leadership bar so stinking high that we just lost sight of the fact that we're doing college ministry. if we're being honest. It was like, hey, I know you signed a covenant, code of conduct. I know you went to Chimmy's, which is a bar in Lubbock, and you got drunk and you're done. It would be conversations like that, where it was like, we would have this such high standard that it's like, yes, we want to hold them to holiness. Do not hear me say anything other than that. But they're college students. They are not going to be perfect. And so the question then is not, are they perfect? We want to hold them to high standards because they say they want to grow, but are they faithful? Are they available? Are they teachable? Because it would be a disservice if someone comes, gets drunk in your ministry, whatever, and you just cut them, as opposed to doing the hard work of discipleship, which is engaging them, helping them, trying to figure out if they are teachable. Does that make sense? And so, are they faithful? Are they available? Are they teachable? So as you begin to be on campus, reach students, begin to do the work of inviting students to invite other students in, you begin to help students see that discipleship is not just about, hey, come and be a part of this. It's, hey, come and be a part of this and also bring your friends. Does that make sense? That is how ministries start, which again, fourth principle, keep it simple, run with the runners and be on campus. That one's not in there, but it should be on campus. So take just a second, another couple minutes or so, to think about whether, regardless of where you're at in your stage of ministry, who are the runners that are there? Who are the faithful students that are not a part of your leadership team, that are just kind of there, but they're faithful? They're available. Maybe you don't know if they're teachable or not, but they're there. Who are the students that might be coming to mind that you should consider inviting into your leadership team? Take just a second. Hopefully, Lord willing, some names come to mind and that you can reach out to them before August comes, have a conversation about that. Okay, before moving on, that was part one. Actually, no, we're not going to do that. I fell into that trap last time of pausing for questions. Terrible idea. We'll just do questions at the end. Write them down. We'll get there, okay? Sorry, pump fake. Okay, part two, growing a college ministry leadership team. So this is where we get into the nitty gritty, but it seemed like most of you guys were a part of the growing and maintaining side of college ministry. But I think even if you're starting, this is still going to be really clear. So really helpful. I hope it's clear. I hope it's helpful too. Principle number 5, leaders recruit leaders. If you don't take anything from this, take this point. Leaders recruit leaders. Principle number 5, leaders recruit leaders. If you are a part of a ministry who has any sort of leadership team at all, you should be asking yourself this question: how do I grow this leadership team? You should be asking this question. This is not so that you would have the coolest, the biggest, the largest college ministry, whatever. But unless your leadership team consists of the entire campus that you're trying to reach, there are always more lost students that need Jesus. Texas Tech, the campus that we primarily do ministry on, 45 some odd thousand students. That's a lot of freaking students. Even if you have 1,000 students at the college that you're trying to reach, that's a lot of students. So unless your college ministry leadership team consists of everyone on campus, you should care about growing your leadership team, because you can't state this enough, is that college students are the best recruiters for your ministry. Whether it's leadership, whether it's just to be a part of, whether it's to just come and hang out and eat pizza, they are the best tools to reach campus. It doesn't matter how cool of a 30-year-old you are, you're still a 30-year-old, okay? Remember, student-led, staff-supported, not staff-led, student-supported. You want to be empowering your students to recruit other people, to bring other people in. Does that make sense? We tracking? Cool. If you have any semblance of a leadership team at all, your students are your best recruiters. Doesn't matter how compelling of a vision that you guys may have, peers recruiting peers, it's the most effective. So going to our leadership, or our pipeline here, each semester we have a 3 to 4 week period that we lovingly refer to as leadership recruitment. And it is so good, y'all. We love it. We hate it. we love it. It's the best. It's the best 3 weeks of the year. So a lot of people talk about, hey, August is like the most intense time. Not for us. It is a 3 to 4 week window in October. So what this is, August is pretty close, but this is as busy. So during this time of leadership recruitment, we push leadership hard. So when we're talking about growing a leadership team, we're talking about leadership recruitment, this phase, this kind of rhythm that we have as a ministry. So during this time, we push leadership hard. We make announcements. We have video testimonies. We have social media push. We sow seeds far and wide. We have our GC leaders reach out. We do this so that if anyone is interested in serving within our college ministry leadership team, they have the opportunity to apply, which we'll get to in a second. So at the same time, we push leadership hard, and we also tell our students, hey, if there are students who've been faithfully coming to your GC, we walk through the same things. If there's students that have been coming to your small groups because you met them on campus or whatever, ask them to consider applying for leadership. It's a 1-2 punch of we post about it, we send and cast seed far and wide, and we have our students do the work of inviting their peers into applying for leadership. So part of the reason why we do that, well, actually, I'll get there in a second. If you were to show up in our ministry in October, November, or March or April, you would not miss this call for students to apply to leadership. And so we're going to walk through a few phases of this leadership recruitment process. And I'm sure you have questions of like, well, leadership's not for everyone. That's true. We'll talk about that in a second. So leadership, again, I'm going to just do that because my handwriting's so bad. Phases of leadership recruitment. So first phase of leadership recruitment is what we say a lot. We say a lot is the leadership interest form. Leadership interest form. Okay, so what this is any student can complete this form. Any student in the world can complete this form. It's a simple form. It's a QR code at our weekly gatherings, at our GCs. It says, hey, if you're interested in serving in leadership, complete that form. And it's just name, contact, very, very, very simple stuff. This is the first step in our pursuit of growing our leadership team, but it's the first step for anyone considering leadership. Think big, wide funnel at the top. In leadership, it may not be for everyone, but we want to put the ask out there. We want to sow as far of seeds as we can, and we'll talk about why here in just a second. But after this, after someone fills out this leadership interest form, we have a staff member who checks their profile. Our executive pastor is the biggest nerd in the world, biggest nerd ever. Our Wi-Fi at our church, his password is Last Jedi is Best Jedi, if that gives you any context for what this person is. I say all that to say, we use a, you don't have to use something like this, most probably don't, but we use basically a CRM to track people. And so every person who's ever filled out a form, we can tell whether or not they're a member of our church. It kind of feels like Google, but we're not going to go there. Anyways, like, why are we turning into a tech company? It's fine. Anyways, kind of freaks me out, but we're okay. Anyways, so someone fills out leadership interest form. We can look on their profile to see if they're a covenant member of the church. Does that make sense? I'm sure you have some way of finding out the same information. If they are a covenant membership, great. We invite them to what we'll talk about in just a second, which is H3. It's like our leadership onboarding class. If they aren't members of the church, we send them to sign up for our covenant membership class, which always happens before H3. Does that make sense? Because again, we require students to be covenant members of the church to be on the leadership team, which leads us to point number 2. H3 stands for head, heart, hands. That's been the name for forever. So assuming that they complete covenant membership requirements, we have them join us for H3, which operates as our leadership onboarding class. So at H3, it's like a 3.5 hour long meeting. It's like an equipping class kind of style, where we tell them all about the ministry. We explain to them the code of conduct. We explain to them what it looks like to be a GC leader, to be a context leader. We walk them through everything in our ministry, and then after this time of equipping, if they say, hey, I'm still interested in joining your leadership team, which some people don't, they're like, hey, I'm out, it's too much. And it's like, that's fine. They get to apply for leadership. They get to apply for leadership. So if you want to, the third point, apply for leadership. So what this happens is at the end, we have a QR code that they scan, takes them to a Google form that just has a bunch of questions. That is what we call our leadership application. We get all up in their business, and I want to empower you to do the same. We get all up into their business. We ask them their testimony. We ask them what their home life is like. We ask them about sin struggles. We ask them when the last time they watched pornography was. We ask them about their relationships, their best relationships, their worst relationship, their hopes for their life. We ask them everything. We get so far into their business, it's uncomfortable. And a lot of times they walk out, they don't even look us in the eye. You're like, yeah, well, that means you probably did a good job on the application. Anyways, we do this because one of our staff values within the college ministry is 99% in the light is still in the dark. 99% in the light is still in the dark. And so part of, you have these clear avenues of discipleship. I'm going to meet up with you at a coffee shop and we're going to read the book of James. Direct discipleship. Then you have indirect discipleship that says, hey, if you say you want to be a part of leadership, we are expecting you to be honest, and we're going to give you every opportunity to be honest. And our very last question at the end of our application is, have you been honest with everything? It's funny. Some people click no, and you're always like, well, that's going to be fun to get into, when you meet up with them. We have lots of stories. If you want to hear some, come grab me after. But we get all up into their business, and after they do this leadership application, they do a leadership interview. Okay, so fill out an application. They get immediately sent to like a sign up Genius form link, whatever. And then 2 staff members are in every single interview. So for example, the reason why you want to do 2-on-1 if you can is because what if I'm homies with Matt and I'm like, dude, Matt's great. Matt's crushing it. He should for sure be a leader. And someone else is like, yeah, dude, Matt kind of sucks, or whatever. But it's like, hey, Matt probably shouldn't be a part of the leadership team, And so it's to provide like an honest kind of conversation around this person. And part of during the leadership interview, again, this is all in the documents that I've sent to you guys, or it's in the QR code, is that we give whoever's interviewing these students a potential new leader interview summary, which is just a template for what questions to ask, how to go over their application, things like that. Okay, so after all of this is pointing, by the way, to some more principles. So just hang on for just a second. After the interview, we tell them that it's going to be a few weeks before they hear back from us on a leadership decision. Okay, which leads us to our last point, which is deliberations. Leadership deliberations. Okay, so this is one of our most hated, important meetings of the year. This is a great time. No, it's great. So a lot of times, we'll have anywhere between 30 and 60 people that'll fill out this leadership interview form. Anywhere from 40 to 50 come to the class, 40 to 50 apply, and then have all these interviews. So this is why I'm saying that it's more crazy than August, is because we have about 3-week window to interview about 10. It's more people than that because we do something else I'm going to share in a second. But anyways, more on that in a second. And then we get to deliberations, which is where we talk about everybody who applied for leadership. So for example, let's say Matt comes in, applies for leadership. Both the dudes who interview him are like, Matt's awesome. And then we have a conversation with our entire college ministry team, which includes guys and gals. And the gals point out and go, hey, Matt's actually super creepy with some of the girls in our ministry. Okay, so again, tedious, yes. Repetitive, to have 2 or 3 conversations about one person, yes. Most of the time it's fine. But there have been so many instances where we have found out something from a gal in our ministry about a dude that's like, yo, he cannot be anywhere near our leadership team, let alone maybe even our church. You know what I'm saying? And so it's important to do these things within community. And again, throughout this whole process, again, leadership, we're about to get to the next principle, but leadership, it may not be for everyone, but we want to put this ask out there to help students discern their next best yes. That's a phrase we use all the time. What's your next best yes? We want to help you discern that, because all discipleship is, all leadership is just God calling them deeper into the local church, deeper into intimacy with Jesus, and we want to help be a part of that. But we sow seeds far and wide, knowing every single year, every single semester, we have someone who fills out this leadership interest form that is not a Christian, without fail. So you could interpret that as, well, that feels kind of like, why would they apply for leadership if they're not Christian? You could go that route, and I would understand. Or you could go, hey, we have someone that cannot articulate the gospel, because, we obviously asked that in leadership application. What's the gospel? Someone can't articulate it. Someone can't tell us about how Jesus has changed their life. It's like, well, maybe they're not a Christian. But we have someone who has applied for leadership and is not a Christian. You get people, if you sow seeds far and wide, that God is doing something in their life. And a lot of times what that looks like is, hey, maybe leadership is not for you this semester, but and we do this as a ministry. Hey, we're going to commit, someone on staff is going to commit to walk with you for the next 6 months and then let you apply again. And part of that is we have really specific, evangelistic type, guides, or not guides, that's a terrible word to use, but discipleship curriculum to go through for people like this. And a lot of times people come to faith through these things. So you're like, hey, sow seeds far and wide. You want to do this? Well, that lowers the bar. It's well, not really, because we don't let people who don't love Jesus serve on our leadership team, but we know who they are. And it's people that God is calling to himself. And a lot of times people come to faith through these conversations. Does that make sense? So you sow seeds far and wide because we want to create every opportunity possible to help people step into this calling. So quick question for y'all. Did I skip principle number 3?
No.
Okay, principle, I think I did. That's fine. We're doing great. We're having fun. Principle number 3 is seek as much. Yeah, I definitely skipped it. Thank you guys for saying no, but I absolutely did skip it. Principle number 3, going back to all of the documents that we give you. Principle number 3 is seek as much clarity around. Did I said it?
Yeah. You really did.
Yeah.
We all wrote it down. So.
Shout out. Sorry, y'all.
It might have been a slight paraphrase. You might have said, make your expectations as clear.
Yeah, okay, but it was close. Hey, that dog will hunt. Let's go. Okay, we did 4, keep it simple, run with the runners.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. 5, leaders, yeah, okay, I know I did that one. Okay, 6, that's where we're at, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's go, we're doing it, we're having fun. Okay, so principle number 6, be clear on how new students take steps to join your leadership team and ministry. Okay, so every leadership recruitment, again, video, testimony, next steps, we are having texting, if not phone call conversations every step of the way. Does that make sense? They're getting staff contact the entire way through the leadership process. Principle number 6, be clear on how students take steps to join your leadership team and ministry. Okay, if again, sow seeds far and wide, and if students are feeling like God is calling them deeper into their ministry, we do not want them to get lost in the process because of our lack of clarity and communication. Does that make sense? If they're going to say no to committing to Jesus deeper in discipleship and to the local church, we don't want it to be because we didn't text back. Does that make sense? So you got to have these structures and pipelines. Okay, so part number 3, maintaining a leadership team. We are cruising. So part number 3, maintaining a leadership team. Okay, so principle number 7, quality discipleship and care retains leaders. Quality discipleship and care retains leaders. It's simple, y'all. If you have student leaders, again, context leaders, GC leaders, senior team, who are being engaged weekly in a discipleship meeting with an adult, that's how the structure, we'll get more on the structure of our, what we kind of give to our leaders in just a second. But if you are engaging weekly in a discipleship meeting with an adult as a student, if you're as a student being given the tools to lead your groups well, if you are being regularly thanked, blessed, checked in on, given free swag, encouraged with all the ways that God is moving in your life and through your ministry on campus, it is not a surprise that students want to stay a part of your leadership team. Does that make sense? Like, if you take care of your leaders, your retention oftentimes takes care of itself. If you take care of your leaders, your retention takes care of yourself. And retention, that's like I get kind of like squirmy when people like incorporate too many like business terms into the church. It just kind of makes you feel icky. I don't know why. There's probably more there. But this idea of retention is a really helpful metric to consider, because if you have a leadership team and the average length of a tenure of a college student on your leadership team is 7 months, you have a problem. Does that make sense? You want your students to sign up as second semester freshmen and crush it for 3.5 years. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so part of that is you need to do the hard work of loving on them, caring for them. Discipleship and care, it retains your leaders. I promise you, take care of them and your retention will take care of itself. So some touch points, again, going back to this, flow chart, whatever it is. If you look at the leadership as discipleship box, there's a few things that our students get as being a part of our leadership team. Weekly grow groups, that's like small discipleship groups, 1, 2, 3, kind of smaller discipleship groups that meet with adults in our church, both staff and adults in our church. Because by God's grace, we've got a good amount of leaders and we need the church to help us. Like we have 7 staff members. We can't disciple 90 leaders. We need the church, and we want the church to be a part of it. Does that make sense? Yes. You want the church to be a part of what you're doing, okay? I could talk on that for a long time, but I'm not. Self-control. So you get that. You get random staff check-ins. So that's like staff will just take a leader to lunch, buy them coffee, bring them a sonic drink when they're working, whatever it is. Staff check-ins, you get that. Monthly leadership trainings, which happen Sunday morning, covering an array of topics. Like next year, ours are going to be all geared towards evangelism. Okay, we're training you, we're equipping you. You get 2 semester leader parties where you go and find the biggest house at your church and you go party. You get food, you get dessert, you get karaoke, and you just go and have fun. Because part of being on leadership team is that you're a community. Does that make sense? You're a community with each other, so we want to have fun with each other. You get semester day of leader equipping. We call it DNA day, which is once a semester. And the big one, this is the big one. End of semester reviews. Remember how I told you that we have about 40 interviews, leadership interviews? So we hate ourselves, and we actually do these end of semester reviews the same time that we do these leadership interviews, or typically about a week after. So what these end of semester reviews look like is it is just a way for staff one-on-one to formally sit down with our leaders to ask them questions like, how's the semester going? How can we be praying for you? What are you thinking for next semester? We also, again, because we hate ourselves, just kidding, it's great, it works great. We have a end of semester review Google form that looks very similar to the leadership application. That's like, hey, how was the semester? How's your grow group relationship? How's your GC going? What's your best relationship? What's your worst relationship? Sin patterns, all the stuff. And we go through that in our one-on-one leadership interview, end of semester reviews with the same style of like interview kind of template form. It's in that QR code that I share with y'all. Same deal. How's it going? How's the semester? Big important question. What are you thinking for next semester? This question, I cannot overstate the importance of, hey, what are you thinking for next semester? Again, remember, these are leaders. These are people who are who've done the application process, who've led GC for a year. You don't want to assume that they're going to come back and lead, okay? And you also want to create space for them to process that decision with you, because a lot of times in our experience before doing these things, you would get leaders who are like, yeah, I'm all in, and they're a context leader for a year, GC leader for a year, and then you go back like, hey, senior year, you better crush it, let's do this. They're like, actually, I'm stepping down. And you're shocked by it, because it came out of nowhere, because you have no avenue to have a conversation. Does that make sense? What these end of semester reviews exist as primarily is a conversation to see how they're doing, to check in on them, on top of all the other ways they're getting checked in on, and to see what they're thinking. So during these, a lot of times it's 95% of the time it's, hey, you're crushing it. Love that you're sharing these things with your grow group leader. Your GC is doing well. We love you. Here's all the ways that God's blessing you. We'll see you next semester. That's how most of them go. Sometimes if students disclose habitual pattern of sin, of whatever it is, we may ask them to step down, or we may ask them to go to counseling. We have a line item in our budget, which I understand not everybody might have this, but to pay for students to go to counseling, because these are members of the church. Does that make sense? They're not just labor to lead a GC. They are members of your church that we are committing to care for. And if their next best yes is to step down from leadership, we will help them make that decision. Does that make sense? But we keep those discipleship relationships there. Does that make sense? Again, just more clarity, more care. Okay. Again, this happens each and every semester. The same time we have our leadership interviews, we have our end of semester reviews. At the end of all of that, after we have a full list of who wants to join, of where all of our current leaders are, we have deliberations, which again is my favorite meeting of the year. After that meeting produces our leadership team for the following semester. Does that make sense? I mean, there was a time 3 years ago where it was May and we had no freaking clue who was going to be our leadership team in the fall. Anybody ever been there? You're like, I hope that people are going to come back, And I mean, we're sitting at the end of April, like locked in with who's going to be there in the fall. You know what I'm saying? And so then your time in the summer then shifts into like, okay, who can we follow up with? It's like, no, how can we get ready to crush welcome week? Does that make sense? And so there's a lot of reasons why things like this are important. So also part of this end of semester review process, it kind of, again, almost assumed discipleship, maybe that's not the right word, indirect discipleship is hey, part of walking with Jesus is you revisit how you're doing spiritually. You know what I mean? That you're not just hey, got saved at whatever fall retreat and that was it. No, it's hey, each semester we want to put before our leaders this call to say, hey, how are you doing? Do you even create space in your own life to consider where you're at? Okay, let's help you do these. Because again, we want to disciple them, not just for 4 years, but we want to show them what it looks like to follow Jesus for the long haul. Does that make sense? Okay, principle number 8, last one, and then we will do some Q&A. Principle number 8, starting, growing, and maintaining a college leadership team is about discipleship, clarity, and care. Doesn't matter if you have 400 students a week or if you have 4 students a week. Starting, growing, maintaining a college leadership team is about discipleship, clarity around expectations and care. So that's all I got. This QR code, you can scan it, whatever you want to do. Or if you're like me and you're like, I'm done. Like, I can't do it anymore. You're like, I just need to go stare at a wall. That's fine too. You can leave. But if you have do we have any questions that may be helpful to ask to the group? What do y'all think? Where y'all at? Okay, what you got?
Your deliberation and your post semester reviews, is that every semester?
Every semester.
Okay, so you do it in
Yep.
in the summer, and then you also do it in the winter?
Yep.
Okay.
Every semester. Because so like we just had our spring end of year reviews, finished up in April for our fall leadership team.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And then we'll do it again in October. Yep.
So your grow groups, are those only for your leaders?
So we require our leaders to be a part of grow groups.
Gotcha.
We create space for non-leaders to also be a part of grow groups with members of the church as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So yeah, we were not asking students who come to our Tuesday night gathering to be in discipleship groups, but we are requiring it for our leaders.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
And then your leadership training you said happens once a month?
Once a month, yeah.
And on here it says equipment classes and DNA days.
Equipping classes are those once a month, leadership trainings are those once a month. Equipping classes are like one-off series that we do at the college ministry, like maybe a late night where we talk about like we're doing ones coming up of like faith and politics, because all of our students are going to be like, what the heck is happening, and how do we like engage in that? So we're going to be doing equipping class like that. And then DNA Day is the once a semester hoorah in January and in August. Like, welcome back. Let's get after it. Yep.
How do you guys, as a team, kind of worked through some of the review stuff with your students at the end of semester evaluations? Because for us, we've done that. We have about 30 leaders in our ministry. There's only 4 staff. And we usually try to get their feedback after events that we do for the first time, more bigger events.
Yep.
Or we get their feedback at the end of the year as we're going through our applications and stuff. And a lot of feedback is not very constructive, more so just critical.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that we do well. And as a staff, we're always deliberating together, what could we do differently? There's a lot of things behind the scene that they don't see.
Sure.
And so we've researched questions, we've talked with each other of okay, how can we kind of manipulate the question to not be so open to your criticism, but let's get some constructive feedback, because we want your perspective and we kind of want some input, but we don't want leaders to think that they're coming up to kind of take our role. For sure. In that ministry.
Yeah, that is a great question, and we have been there, because when you communicate clear expectations like this, you're going to have people that get frustrated, and you're going to have people nitpick, and you're going to be like, we're doing everything because we love you, and they're going to be like, it's not enough, or some version of that. And so what we actually implemented a few years ago, so we have staff values, like college ministry values, and one of ours is celebrate always. And so during this coming year, like this coming fall, our September leader training is only a time of celebrating. Okay. It is literally going to be an hour and a half of, hey, we have been evangelizing, pushing campus hard. Let's talk about stories and let's hype each other up. Because what you're asking is how do we get our students not being so critical? That's a hard issue. You know what I'm saying? There's probably no question that's going to answer that perfectly. That's going to get, it's like, for whatever reason, maybe your students are in a season of critical spirit, or whatever it is. We've been there. We can be grateful for all the awesome things we do, but that's still the reality. And so we have tried to not just say, hey, what are the ways that we're doing well or whatever, but how can we create a culture of celebration, of gratitude, of gratefulness, you know what I mean? So that the critical eye is lower on the totem pole, because it's more natural to encourage. And we've even seen in our end of semester reviews, it's changed, is it one of our questions at the end is what's one way that you'd wish the college ministry would grow, and what's one way you're grateful? And it's y'all are doing great. And the other one's we just love being here. Whereas 2 years ago, it was oh my God, it was I was why is everyone so mad? Hope that helps. I think it's a little deeper than just a question.
Yeah, I'm more of the blunt one on our team. And so I'm constantly calling out hard issues in some of our leaders, but trying to encourage them and kind of in a sense spiritually pour into that a little bit. But even then there's resistance. Yep. And I know that there's only so much we can do.
For sure.
I didn't know if there were things we could consider as a team of, what can we do that even if they're in that critical state, that we can kind of help maneuver them through it. In a sense.
Yeah. It's a hard question. Yeah. I think it's a culture of gratitude as best as you can. It's not going to fix everything, but we've been there. It's normal. You're not alone in that.
Cool.
Yep.
So for your end of like the semester review, so we do like end of year like review for all of our students, like our student leaders, so like, hey, like especially like that's what we call like our like recommitment form. Like even like people who are graduating, so like fill it out so they can like hear stories and stuff like that. Also like have the like, oh, like do you want to like where are you at for next year? You guys always meet up with every student after that to talk about it, because one of the options like that always happens in finals week, and probably most of our college students go to UT Austin, and so finals week are just like everyone's like dying, and so it's like if sometimes like the best thing we can do to bless them is to just be like, hey, we're praying for you, like Godspeed, like and let them kind of be there.
Yeah, every semester we try to do it. Yeah, we try to do it before finals gets here, and a lot of times is like we'll go to them. Hey, I know you got 2 seconds between classes. You got 15 minutes to have your end of semester review, and we go to them. But it's so important to have the meeting in person. So yeah. Any other questions? I think we're out of time. Got a couple more minutes, y'all. We can be done. If you have other questions, you can come and ask. If not, thank y'all for coming. Hope it was helpful. You guys, like I said at the beginning, I have no idea, but you can scan the QR code, make copies of these, look at them, whatever's helpful, do with them what you want. Hope it's helpful. Thank y'all.
Thank you.